Hey everyone, so I am here with the host of The Rational National and former Green Party Canadian politician, David Doel. So welcome to the show. Did I say your name right?
Yeah, David Doel.
David Doel.
It's like Bob Dole, but spelled differently.
Perfect, perfect. So you have a YouTube channel right now that's currently exploding. You do phenomenal political commentary. Can you tell us a little bit about your channel and kind of what you talk about? Because I think people that watch my show are going to like your show as well.
Yeah. So yeah, I started the channel about a year and a half ago after I ran as a Green Party MP candidate in the 2015 election. I lost, obviously, but I wanted to find a platform to keep talking about progressive policies and really pushing these ideas out there. So I started the Rational National. I kind of posted videos on and off, but then really about a month and a half ago or 2 months ago, I started being more consistent and really posting every day of the week. And yeah, the channel's ballooned over the past 2 months, and I just try to bring a different perspective in terms of an outsider, somebody not in the U.S., but who's really engaged in U.S. politics, and try to bring that different perspective in. And also what I want to do with the channel is kind of bridge the gap between conservatives and liberals, because I feel there's a lot of the way we talk to conservatives sometimes, I think it unfairly puts them down in the sense where it turns them off. So like when we just crap on people who we don't agree with, what it ends up doing is it actually closes the discussion before it even starts. So if we have this discussion where we're actually open and talking and actually engaging in why they may think something and not just what they think is wrong, then we can find a way to actually bridge that gap and convince those people who may have just kind of fall down the wrong path and open them up to newer ideas that they may have not been exposed to initially.
That's great. Yeah, I think that's a great idea. And you find a way to offer progressive commentary while not shitting on, conservatives with it, which is actually a difficult thing to do because, on my show, I tend to get emotional sometimes and I'll just, blurt out names sometimes, which isn't very helpful. So I think that what you're doing is actually pretty helpful. And your commentary is spot on. But I wanted to get your opinion because you are a Canadian. So you comment on, American politics and whatnot. So once and for all, will you just, for all of my socialist and communist viewers, tell them how shitty your healthcare system is in Canada? Because they just think that single payer is, the end all be all. What's it like in Canada for you?
This is the funny thing about healthcare here that I find so different compared to Americans. I don't think about our healthcare system. So Americans, because they have to get health insurance, because they have to, really think about and compare their options and look at the different insurance companies and what they're being offered. I don't think about it. Like when I go to the doctor, I get my health card, which we all have a health card if you're a citizen. All you need is your health card. You go to the doctor, you give them your health card. They're like, cool. You wait for a few minutes and you go see your doctor. And that's pretty much it. And even if you don't have a family doctor, there's medical clinics. You can just walk in anywhere. They're all around. You just walk in, show them your health card. That's it. You walk out. No discussion. Like it's so simple that I find that Americans have this issue where they're in this bubble that all they've known is this private insurance system. And when you grow up in that system, to you it's normal. But with all these other nations, you notice when they adopt universal healthcare, public funded healthcare, they don't go back to private insurance companies. I mean, there may be the private-public option, but they all have a public healthcare system in place. And it's so weird that the discussion doesn't immediately go to, hey, we need Medicare for all. We need single payer. Because look at all these other countries where it's working. Like, this is the one thing that I find a lot with Americans, and it's not to crap on American viewers or anything, but
a
lot of Americans...
It's okay. We deserve it.
A lot of Americans just they don't see outside their own country, and your country would benefit by looking and seeing what other countries are doing that is working, and simply looking at that and seeing how you can adopt those ideas to your own country. And it's just a matter of opening minds and getting these ideas out there. And I think Bernie Sanders did a fantastic job of doing that, bringing these ideas to the forefront that many people hadn't really thought about before. Many Americans hadn't thought about, wait, our healthcare system is kind of weird. Why am I paying a private insurance company, and Why can't I just go to the doctor and see a doctor and then go home without having to worry about all that mess? So it's good that these ideas are now actually starting to get out there. And I think the more people hear about them, the more it's convincing that is the way to go. And it's just really just a matter of time, I think, before Americans do get Medicare for all. It's just a matter of having a government that will actually enact it.
Right. Now, you follow American politics a lot, so you know that, currently, and you talk about the same thing in terms of Democrats, how the Democratic Party, we're critical of them because they're resistant to change. They're supposed to be the main opposition to Republicans. And I'm not sure if you heard about the California debacle where Anthony Rendon single-handedly blocked single payer. So we have a Democratic Party currently that we're trying to fight to get them to move in the right direction towards single payer. And in your country, so you noticed, you talked about on one of your videos how NDP, that party is basically realizing that there is a progressive wave and they're kind of changing, unlike the Democratic Party. So can you talk about that?
Yeah. So the NDP have always supposed to have been the progressive party. In the last several years, they kind of lost their way in terms of, at least in terms of the way they messaged their messaging when they ran for seats. But what we've noticed now is, so our Liberal Party, like Justin Trudeau, he's, for some reason, the media, they love him. They talk about him all the time, but they don't. Justin Trudeau, he's a neoliberal. He's a centrist. He's essentially a good comparison is Barack Obama. So Trudeau ran a progressive message, but he's in office and he's essentially running a neoliberal government. Now, what the NDP have noticed is they've now seen this rise of Bernie Sanders and of Jeremy Corbyn. And they're like, hey, look at all this energy behind an actual, real, bold, progressive message. Now, if we adopt that to Canada, where there's that fervor as well for a real progressive message, then we may actually win back some seats and gain some power. So right now there's an NDP leadership race going on, and I believe in November they end up picking the leader. So there's 5 candidates, and they're all kind of saying the same message. They're all saying we need to go in a more progressive, more bolder progressive vision and not be afraid of it. Don't be afraid to adopt these policies. Don't be afraid to say that corporations should be taxed more and the rich should be taxed more. And don't be afraid to say we need to be more environmentally friendly and more aware of what these pipelines are doing to our world. So they're really learning now from what's gone on around the world and seeing that a populist message works. And I think it's really going to help them. And look, this is coming from a Green Party guy, a guy that ran against the NDP, the Liberals, everybody else. So I think what NDP doing are smart, and in some ways it'll cut into our base, because if the NDP adopt a real progressive message, then people are going to see that, hey, I could vote for Green Party and grow the Green Party, or I could vote for NDP, who actually have a little more power than the Green Party, and get these policies adopted sooner rather than later. So what NDP are doing right now I think it's brilliant.
And what you're saying is, I think it's relevant to America as well, because what you said about, them cutting into the Green Party's base, that's what the Democrats can do here. And I know that there are differences. I mean, you're in a parliamentary, we're in a presidential system, but we're still majoritarian in that these third parties, they still influence the bigger parties in terms of taking that base away. So yeah. I've argued the same thing, basically, that if Democrats are able to move back to the left, they can cut into the green, and they don't have to worry about a third-party spoiler. Like, I'm sure you've heard about the talk about how Jill Stein is to blame for Hillary Clinton losing and whatnot. Yeah. And Ann Reid, who we both really love and admire a lot, talks about this all the time. So it's just moving back to the left is the way that the Democratic Party can win again. And I think that this is what progressives are basically saying and trying to get them to do. But, how successful we are at doing that, it's tough to determine currently.
And I just want to say, I think it's so ridiculous to blame Green Party voters or Jill Stein voters, because this is the reality. If you don't have Jill Stein as an option, they're just going to stay home.
Exactly. I
mean, people aren't. Nobody's at home contemplating, am I gonna vote for a neoliberal or vote for an extremely left candidate? I mean, I'm sure there's a few of those. But the vast majority of people that vote green because they believe in those ideas. And the fact that the Hillary campaign moved to the center during the general election, thinking that there were all these centrists who were going to vote for her, all these neoliberals in the country. They realized, no, there's none of those people. That the actual voters, the majority of people that don't vote, they don't vote because there aren't those ideas out there that are exciting them. They aren't being given a reason to actually vote. So, I mean, for everything Hillary did, from picking Tim Kaine as her VP, from not campaigning where she should have, for not campaigning on a real progressive message. I mean, there were so many mistakes that she made, not reaching out to the progressive base, that's what cost her the election. And I mean, obviously there are all different other factors. You can blame a million other things, but I think the main reason that Hillary lost is because she tried to go after Republican and centrist voters and realized those people aren't really there.
Yeah, exactly. And what you're kind of saying, it speaks to a recent election, albeit a different election, between John Ossoff and Karen Handel in Georgia's 6th district, where traditionally this district has gone to Republicans for decades. So Democrats thought, well, what we should do in this district is we should run someone who's relatively conservative, because since it's a conservative district, we'll win. Now, I've argued against that, and you've also argued against that, but why do you think they shouldn't be more conservative in these conservative districts?
So this is the argument I make in one of my videos about this race. The conventional wisdom coming out of that election was that voter turnout was really high. It was fantastic. It was 46%. 46%? Like, you're supposed to be impressed by 46%. 54% of people didn't vote. Why didn't they vote? Because they didn't have an option that they wanted to vote for. They didn't see ideas out there that they wanted to vote for. So the conventional wisdom is you have all these very conservative areas that would never vote for a liberal. I see comments on my videos all the time on people like Nina Turner saying, I'm a conservative, but I would vote for this woman because I believe in the message that she's delivering. They don't care what your label is. And really, the only actual detriment to John Ossoff in terms of the label of Democrat is being attached to someone like Nancy Pelosi, someone who voters realize they don't like Nancy Pelosi. They don't like that establishment view of the Democratic Party. They don't want to support that. So if John Ossoff is being sold as someone who's attached to Nancy Pelosi, then he's status quo. He's a moderate. He's a centrist, and I don't want to vote for that. So these candidates actually have to reach out to this progressive base, these people that don't normally vote, and give them an actual reason to vote with a real bold message. And I think part of it too is people have to believe in that message. And part of believing in that message is having a campaign that isn't run on corporate money. And I think that's what a lot of great that's what Justice Democrats, for example, are trying to do, trying to run candidates who aren't taking corporate money, who aren't taking PAC money. And I think that would go a long way into improving these candidates' chances of actually winning these elections. So I'm hoping to see Justice Democrats and other similar groups come out and show a real improvement in 2018 and show that these candidates running on a bold progressive message and not taking PAC money can actually win these elections.
Right. That's what I'm hoping for as well. Now, the thing about, you mentioned about how they tied John Ossoff to Nancy Pelosi. What they don't realize is that doesn't just hurt, the candidate when it comes to the Republican voters. That hurts them among Democratic voters as well, because I don't like Nancy Pelosi. I'm progressive. Exactly. She's status quo. She doesn't want to go in the direction of single payer. So it's frustrating, being in America. And it seems simple. The solution is simple, but they're not listening, and they don't want to listen. So it's frustrating. And then you have people on the mainstream media reinforcing everything that they're doing wrongly. I mean, someone like Ann Reid, for example, which I wanted to have you kind of comment on Ann Reid, because you and I have some strong thoughts on Ann Reid and her corporatism and just, being a propagandist for the Democratic Party. So you have some epic rants on Ann Reid. I'm going to encourage all my viewers to go to your channel and watch those rants, because that's basically what sold me on your channel. Just fantastic Ann Reid rants. So do you have any comments on Ann Reid? And, what she's doing is actually harmful in terms of getting the Democratic Party to change, but she's kind of telling them you're doing everything right, so don't change a thing.
Yeah, so this is why I go after someone like Ann Reid, because she has real pull. there are people that watch MSNBC who think Joyanne Reid is a progressive, and they think that what she's saying is based on facts and makes sense. But Joyanne Reid is, the reason she angers me so much is because she comes off as somebody who actually has this deep hate for Bernie Sanders. And I don't understand why. I mean, you can have criticisms about, Chris Hayes or Rachel Maddow or whoever else is on MSNBC, but they don't actively hate on progressive politicians. They don't actively hate on Bernie Sanders. Joy Reid actively hates Bernie Sanders, and it drives me nuts. So yeah, I have one rant on there. It was just supposed to be meant for my patrons, but then after I shot it, I realized this is actually a good video, so I put it on YouTube. But yeah, she has these moments where, I mean, so after the Ossoff loss, all she's doing is defending the Democrats, defending why they lost. But when you had the more progressive candidate, and I believe it was Montana who lost, all she did was she all of a sudden turned into this person saying, "Oh, this proves that a progressive message can't work because this one guy who was attached to Bernie Sanders ran this one progressive race and lost." Meanwhile, the Democrats have lost 1,000 seats since 2009.
Yeah.
So this is, I mean, the comparison is nuts. You can't just have one loss in a progressive race and say that the progressive message is dead. You can't run this way. You need to actually push this, and it needs to be supported by the Democratic Party, because if it's just these individuals trying to get up there and trying to get their voice out, but they don't have the actual money and the support behind them to actually push that message out there, then you're pushing them out there without a real support and base to be able to actually succeed. So until there's a real support base for these progressive candidates, then there won't be a real test to see if they can actually win. And people like Joyanne Reid continue pushing this conventional wisdom and masking it as progressivism when it's not. And my hope is that people will, search up Joyanne Reid or search up MSNBC and come across our videos and see, oh wait, they actually make good points. Joyanne Reid is not telling me the truth. And maybe it'll change their mind on how they feel about MSNBC or about certain people on those networks.
Right. And, the thing that bothers me about, Joyanne Reid basically doing apologetics for the neoliberals who lose and, blaming progressives for being progressive when they lose is that when you look at, or when you compare Rob Quist and James Thompson to John Ossoff, for example, I mean, the Democratic Party, the National Party basically surrendered those races. The DNC and the DCCC, they largely ignored them. James Thompson certainly until the last day, basically. So yeah. You can't really, unless the National Party invests in progressives, they're still handicapped because they don't have that the funding from the National Party, and they're taking no corporate money, so they're handicapped. They're at a disadvantage. So I don't think you can even compare John Ossoff to Rob Quist. So it is frustrating, when she goes out there and says, well, it's because of the progressive message. That's a really intellectually lazy argument to make. I mean, you have to be nuanced there. You have to understand the differences. So yeah.
And she also made the argument that because the state was white, that it was the best chance for Bernie Sanders to win. She keeps attaching Bernie Sanders to white people. Bernie Sanders has a working class message, a message really for everyone. It's not about white people. I don't know why Joy keeps thinking that white people are Bernie's most biggest supporters. When you look at polling, African Americans are his highest support base. Because, I mean, using your brain, you could just know liberals tend to be African Americans tend to be more liberal than white people. So when you have the idea that Bernie had, or a Bernie type candidate has the best chance in a whiter state is just insane. I mean, you have to go watch my video, but I break down her arguments for why she thought Montana was the perfect state for a Bernie candidate to win and ended up losing. But anyways, I could go on and on about Joyanne Reid. She is just she's got a screw loose or something. I can't explain her anger towards Bernie Sanders, especially when you go back and you see a tweet of hers from, I believe it was 2010, and she was praising him.
Yep.
So what happened between then and now? It's really interesting.
That's the question that I'm asking about a bunch of people who I previously looked up to. I mean, Bill Maher, for example, is someone who was a comedian who I respected, and I watched his show every single week because I thought that his analyses, even though I didn't agree with them 100% of the time, he had some good things to say that was actually different. I mean, he wasn't pushing Democratic Party orthodoxy, but once Hillary Clinton becomes the Democratic Party nominee, all of a sudden, he's Team Democrat, rah-rah. He has zero criticism for them, and when he does criticize them after they've fucked up and lost 1,000 seats, it's a really tepid criticism, so there's so many people that I used to look up to that I no longer do. And I think this is why independent media shows like yours, like mine, they've just exploded over the course of the last year or so because, this mainstream, it's almost like a cult where you have to be part of the cool kids club, the Democratic Party. And we're not there anymore, especially millennials. Like we're not on board with neoliberalism and corporatism. And it's time that everyone in the mainstream media wake the fuck up before people like us overtake them.
I think this is a major issue with mainstream media, and what separates us from mainstream media is we have introspection on liberals and on the Democratic Party, and can actually are able to criticize what they do wrong, and that builds an audience that they trust us because we're being honest with them. We're not hiding all the faults of the Democratic Party. We're talking about them out in the open. And when you have people in media, in mainstream media, covering for the Democratic Party, people see through that. People know you aren't being honest with them. But when you actually are able to criticize both parties and talk about how money is the most corrupting influence in Washington, then people they trust us because they know that's true. And I mean, that's the secret message. If mainstream media talks more about the influence of corporate money, they won't do that because they are influencing the politicians. But if they talk more about that and we're open about criticizing the party that they identify with, then they would be able to retain their audience. But they're slowly losing an audience because people are seeing right through them.
Right. They lack objectivity. And one thing that I wanted to ask you about, because I don't know if you've received the same criticism, is that in criticizing Democrats, there's this implication that we are pro-Republican or pro-conservative. So what do you say to that about people that say, well, you're critical of the Democratic Party, but look at the Republicans. Why are you criticizing Democrats when the Republican Party is so extreme? Shouldn't you focus all your energy on Republicans? What do you say to that personally?
So this is the way I look at it. If we're going to criticize I have no problem with criticizing Republicans. But if you're going to criticize them, then what are you offering in return? Because if the Democratic Party isn't a party that actually represents a real, honest voice, then you can't just criticize the Republican Party, because then people, they see through that. They realize, wait, but both parties have the issue with corporate money. Why are you just criticizing Republicans on this? So it's that sort of idea where, sure, you can criticize Republicans, but if you're not giving anybody an alternate, a legitimate, real option that actually represents the voices of real people, then there's no real message there. And you have to be able to criticize both sides, because we want to make the Democratic Party better. That's why I talk about the Democratic Party. That's why I criticize them, because I want them to improve. I want people, Democratic voters and liberals, to push the party in the right direction so that they can actually win seats back and push a real message that represents real people and not just the rich and corporations. So I think it's important to have that objectivity to really improve the party that is supposed to be the progressive party, or supposed to be the liberal party.
Right. Now, one thing that I wanted to touch on really quickly is, because since you're a Canadian, I don't know if you've had any pushback. Whenever I talk about, UK politics or some other country, I get pushback saying, well, you're an American, you shouldn't be talking about this. I don't know if you receive the same pushback with respect to America, but I actually think that your voice is really important, because that outsider perspective it's great, because it prevents us from remaining in an echo chamber and just hearing, our own voices. So I do think that your voice is it's necessary. I forgot the point that I was going to make with respect to...
it was about how people react to me being Canadian and talking about American politics. I noticed, so there are some comments about people, or from people who say, oh, you're Canadian, don't talk about Americans. But I'm actually surprised how little that comes up. And I read the majority of the comments that appear in my channel. I'm luckily that channel is young enough that I can, but there isn't a lot of that. So I think as long as people know you're being honest with them and you're not trying to hide who you are, and you're honest with your message and what you believe in, then people are open to taking criticism no matter where it comes from, as long as it's based in honesty and based in fact.
And one thing that I wanted to emphasize is that as a Canadian, you do have a stake in American politics, and I think that a lot of people that are outside the U.S., they have a stake in it, because you made a point in one of your videos that I thought was fantastic, was you talked about how the United States influences the policies of all other countries, basically, and they influence Canada as well. So did you want to talk about how that's the case in terms of any specific policies, if you had any?
Yeah, so the one I always go back to, because I'm a big advocate of psychedelic medicine, is in 1971, I believe it was 71, the U.S. pushed, at the United Nations, they pushed an idea to ban all psychedelic medicines and all drugs, like marijuana, everything. So there were all these studies being done on LSD and psilocybin mushrooms and these various psychedelics they were finding it was benefiting people. But because the U.S. pushed for this ban at the UN, all these countries banned it. And so we have this gap of like 50 years where there wasn't proper research being done into psychedelic medicines like ayahuasca, like mushrooms, like MDMA, all these psychedelics that have a connection to the benefits, to benefiting people that have PTSD, anxiety, depression. I have a personal experience with ayahuasca. So I went to Peru a couple of years ago. I did ayahuasca, and it helped me immensely with depression. And the idea that the U.S. can push these ideas at the UN and all these other countries adopt it, it's proof that the U.S. has a massive impact on the world. And that's why, I mean, I do have a personal connection to the U.S.'s impact on policy around the world, and we notice that. And I mean, there's a reason why the U.S. is a superpower. It's not just Americans that think that. We all around the world, we all realize the U.S. has a very integral role in the world. So whatever the U.S. pushes, whether it's in terms of war or certain policies, it does affect the rest of the world because there's a major impact in what you do on us.
Right. And one other issue that I notice is I talk about net neutrality pretty frequently on my channel, and I'll see comments from international viewers saying, please don't do this, America, because then my country's going to want to do it. I think it was a UK viewer that actually said that. I'm not sure, though. But, I constantly see this feedback from international viewers saying, great, now my country's going to do this after the United States implements this specific policy. So, yeah, I think that people do have a stake. And furthermore, I mean, we're neighbors, so I think that you should be able to criticize on it. And like I said, the outsider perspective, I think, is not just something that's appreciated, but I think it's necessary. Because people like you can say, hey, single payer, it's pretty good, actually. It's not as horrible as they like to fearmonger about. Yeah. I think that that's really, really important. So I want to make one last pitch to my viewers to go and check out your channel, because it's great. So I've been told that my channel, The Humanist Report, is the gay version of Secular Talk. I'm dubbing the Rational National the Canadian version of The Humanist Report. So we all kind of play off each other in different ways. So do you want to make one last pitch, or to just kind of go over some topics that you typically talk about on your channel? Because again, I really think that if you watch The Humanist Report, there's a lot of topics that overlap, and we cover the same thing, and I think that for the most part we agree on a lot. I don't know if we agree on everything, because I haven't heard your opinion on everything, but I mean you offer a great perspective. So I mean, do you just want to give one last pitch before we go?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, if you're looking for an outsider perspective, a progressive perspective, a perspective of someone that wants to bridge the gap between conservatives and liberals, then check out my channel. YouTube.com/The Rational National. On Twitter, I'm at David Doel, Doel. And just check it out, see if you like it, and throw me a comment. Let me know what you think.
All right, perfect. And one last thing I'll ask you is, there is a neoliberal troll on, well, actually, I don't know if it's a troll, on Twitter, who made this gigantic graphic. I'll put it up on the screen. Had a bunch of people's faces saying, these people, these are progressives that should be in prison for what they did.
I saw that, yeah.
I was excluded. You were excluded. I don't know how pissed you were, but I was pretty offended that I also am not a thug that deserves to be in prison.
Well, I'm fairly new still, so I don't think I expected to be on there. But yeah, you should have been on there.
I should be in prison, right?
You should be in prison. You should go to jail for pushing a loving progressive message out there.
Thank you. I was pissed off. It's just one of those things where, man, I thought I was a thug that deserved prison time, but apparently not.
Maybe next time you will.
Maybe next time. We'll see. I did tweet to that person and tell them to exclude me, or to include me, excuse me, and not to exclude me. So we'll see if that works. And hopefully you could get on the list as well, because I feel like
I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, all my friends are on there. What the hell, man?
Yeah.
All right, David. Well, thanks so much for coming on the show.
All right. Thanks for having me on.
Support this podcast by joining the independent progressive media revolution today at humanistreport.com.